Have you ever considered an academic career? Well, hi folks, Michael here. As a tenured university professor in the US, I thought I'd share some insights into what it's like working as a professor. In this video, you're going to hear straight from the horse's mouth. As somebody who has been pursuing academia for over 2 decades now, multiple countries, multiple universities, teaching students across a diverse set of subjects within my discipline, researching and serving the wider academic community. First, a little background, and let's get into the insights. Oh, and if you're new, or not so new, and you find this video helpful, please take a second to click on that like button and subscribe. It helps the algorithm, and I would be very grateful for it, so thank you so much, you guys. First, a little bit about me. I have been interested in academia for well over 2 decades now at this point. So after coming from an academic parent, my father, as well as my mother who was into teaching, being at the university was something that was always in my blood. Sure, I had some experience interning in the industry of stockbroking and some other areas as well, where I was kind of crossing paths with people in the financial services sector. But really where I cut my teeth was in academic research. And I got some great experiences as an undergraduate working with some professors, in particular one area where I was using some data that I'd got from a magazine that was almost 300 years old to help shine some light on a problem that had perplexed economic historians for multiple decades. Pushing the boundaries of research and advancing society's knowledge was really something that I loved after that particular experience. And of course, the challenge, the kudos, the status, that intelligentsia, it just appealed to me much more at that early age than just purely running after money. So I continued, and after graduating pretty much around the top of my class right the way through with some healthy competition from some other students, I then pursued a master's in economics where I read over in the UK at Cambridge University. Now after that 1 year I took a gap year, did some more research for the same professor, and then started a PhD over in the US, up in the cold city of Chicago at Northwestern University, before transferring back home to my home country of Ireland for personal reasons. That's Trinity College Dublin, where I continued my PhD. But even then, in my 3rd year, I decided that I was going to leave. I was going to go over to the University of Pennsylvania, get some experience there, and finally return back to Ireland, where I'm from, to wrap up my PhD, which was around about 2015. And since then, I have been here at Villanova University on tenure track first. That was 3 and 3 years for the first probation, and then the final 3 to get the permanence or academic tenure. And after that, after publishing, staying on at the university, getting promoted to associate professor, I'm here right now researching, teaching, and acting in service, which I love. So right at the start, one thing that is absolutely crucial and important if you want to become an academic is you have to enjoy, or at least be good at, research. So figuring this out early is definitely worth its weight in gold. Research is the bread and butter of being an academic. So that could be when you're at the, let's say, undergraduate level, you're doing some research projects like final term projects. At the master's level, it could be that you're doing a thesis. It could be that you are doing something like the PhD level, where at that point you're doing a full PhD thesis, right? But in terms of promotion, even in getting a job in the first place, like landing your first job out of the PhD, it's going to be all about your research at the end of the day. The money, the grants, the promotions, getting permanence or tenure, the elusive, coveted tenure position in universities is very much got to do with that. So if research isn't your thing, then I would probably think twice about thinking about becoming an academic. It is just very, very important altogether. Now, presenting your research, that's something as well. So that could be at conferences, that could be at all kinds of places, whether they're domestic, like they could be inside your university, could be like local, in the local area, city, town, state, or national, or even international conferences. So that's very important. And pretty much, again, as I said, the funding, the rises, the promotion, the bonuses, if you're getting, let's say, 2/9 or 1/3 of your annual salary, could be paid in the summer, and that's largely determined by your research. So Research, 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 that is the main thing about being an academic. You are trying to push the boundaries or the frontiers of knowledge, and that's where you're instructing usually young adults or adults of all ages and about known things, but you're pretty close to you're supposed to be pushing the edge in your particular field. So that's very, very important indeed. And again, it's trying to distribute your ideas in terms of conferences or in terms of research presentations around. It could be international. Again, it could be that you are presenting at all kinds of conferences and you're trying to write your papers out, conduct your research, so come up with the idea, implement the idea, write it up, maybe publish it in a book form for certain subjects or in a short paper form for other subjects, or long paper as the case may be. But that's very, very important. If research isn't your thing, then it's probably not going to be a good fit for you to become an academic. So that's part of it. That's really the biggest part, is research. That's one of the first parts of the triangle in academia. The other two being teaching, as we'll see, and service. Well, it looks like today's economics seminar, the research one anyway, that's cancelled, but teaching, that's still happening. So in terms of teaching, this is the next big thing about academia. If you don't like teaching, it's also probably not a good fit for you, at least in the university setting. There are some other research institutions where you can almost avoid entirely teaching. Likewise, there are some institutions where you primarily focus on teaching and can more or less avoid research. But research will be the bread and butter of most academic positions, and really starting off, you want to sell the research and a close second teaching. Some universities, again, they're going to basically balance the both, but you need to be excelling in your research first if you're thinking. But teaching is also something, and you get the instant gratification. So whereas research is delayed gratification, it can take years for some research to come out, depending on the field, right? Between the time you start and the time it's finished. You're coming up with an idea, you're implementing the idea, you're presenting the idea, distributing the idea, writing it up, submitting it, getting it published, revising it, etc. So it can take years. So there's the delayed gratification. Whereas, and that's good, but whereas with teaching, I mean, that's what attracted me towards academia in the first place, was I just loved that aha moment, right? That sudden look on a student's face where they eyes open, they realize a concept. There's just nothing better than that, right? There's nothing more satisfying as an instructor, just to see the change and to see that student, usually an adult, to grow in that path. Honest to goodness, like, I love it when the students get there and they get to their positions eventually, wherever that is. So the educational aspect, you get that instant kick, right? Because sometimes you can be waiting for a long time for the delayed gratification of research, and in the meantime you need that kick. So certainly teaching is a passion of mine, it's a vocation, and I think if you really want to be more well-rounded academic, you should enjoy teaching and helping the next generation and helping inspire the new minds. And related to teaching, something that you might not think is mentoring, this idea of mentoring. Now, at first, you're probably going to be a recipient of this. So maybe as an undergraduate, you're meeting with professors. First of all, you're maybe just getting undergraduate thesis or meeting professors in office hours, getting help. Then it could be a senior research thesis, then maybe master's thesis. And again, your research really you get pushed into it more in the master's level, and certainly deep diving it at the PhD level. And at that point, you really are mentored by your dissertation committee, your advisor, supervisor. And after that, it starts to you're more independent after that when you're on tenure track and you're an assistant professor, and there you're mingling with, but you're still getting some help, right, with the more seniors in your field, some of the associates, the full professors, people that you look up to. And that can be great when you have a good relationship there with different people, different levels. So that can really help. But mentoring, again, that's being on the recipient side, but then on the other side, it flips. Maybe you're not expecting that, but suddenly you're the one that's giving the advice. You're the one that basically is mentoring at first undergraduate students. Maybe you're writing references. Sometimes even high school students approach you for some research experience. Sometimes undergrads want more research experience. So really, it can be that. It can be that you're also helping other colleagues that are maybe more junior colleagues, graduate students for sure. Maybe they're asking some questions in office hours. They're asking about not just your own topic, but maybe what other courses should they study in your field, in my field of economics? or what their career choices might look like, or how to best prepare themselves for going on the job market, or how to best prepare themselves in terms of maybe coding or books they can read in advance so they're going to excel later on. Maybe it's writing references to get into grad school or to get into jobs. Then you're mentoring other people who are maybe at the PhD level, the graduate level, on their research, or helping them out with some of their papers, maybe being a co-author or a supervisor. Eventually, you're helping some even assistant professors and other people in your field where maybe they're struggling with how to improve their paper. It could be at a conference, it could be even at a talk, where you're giving them advice in terms of, oh, you should focus on this particular topic when you're writing, in your introduction, how to sell the introduction a little bit better, how to market it, like where are the applications, what are the policies of this paper, how can you advertise to the public. Maybe there's some weaknesses, maybe add this to your appendix, put this in your conclusion, change your writing, because it took for me, at research, it took me years. And then all of a sudden, like I didn't know what I was doing. Then all of a sudden, it was like 2 in the same year I published, and then 3 in the next year. So it really came in waves. So there was nothing, 0, 1 pretty much. Either you have or you haven't. And that publish or perish mentality is definitely important. But it really incentivizes you, and that's why it's important. And I absolutely love mentoring. That's one of my favorite parts of the actual job as an academic. And that can be in various roles, as we'll see. Now, I should also mention that really it's research is how you go up in the world, is how you get promoted, how you get raises. And going from other universities, usually to get raises in the US is fairly flat, but in other countries it jumps up, the scale jumps up, or even when you move from one institution to the next. And you're poached or hired according to your research. It's a little bit like sports when you score the goal. You can put all the work in the world. It's all input. The output is what they want to see the results. It's not how many shots you're attempting, it's how many shots you're making, how many goals you're scoring, how many points in basketball, etc. That's what really counts. Publication, so conversions of the actual research. You could have 200 pieces of pamphlets, but no one actually thinks they're any worthwhile. They're not published. So you really got to show by approval of the community of scholars that this is worthwhile. Now, the third part of the triangle beside research and teaching is service, of course. That's so important. And this could be within the university, within a department. It could be that you're on a hiring committee. It could be on your undergraduate research committee, organizing an annual research conference or competition. It could be various other things like new courses, etc. You could be on college level committee. So the university is usually, you've got a department, let's say like the economics department, and that is typically housed within a business school, along with things like marketing, finance, accounting, information systems, you name it, lots of stuff, real estate, lots of different places. So we could think about, again, just something like that, like your college. You might be on committees like where you're looking at other courses. So it could be new courses that are being run for maybe 1 or 2 semesters and they're making it permanent. So you're looking and trying to compare, like, do we have space? Is this course in economics going to overlap too much with something in finance, for instance? Or it could be other committees inside the college. Let's say it's on research, so you want to make sure it's fair, so that let's say that economics are not just giving the points for journals and things like that that would favor them, that they need to be standardized somewhat between different disciplines. So it's good to do those things at the college level. Now, the department, let's say economics, might be housed within a college, let's say business, but then there are several colleges typically within a university. So this could be something like the College of Business, but also the College of Arts and College of Science. So you could have a Department of History there, you could have the Biology Department. There could be other colleges like the College of Engineering, where you've got maybe like civil engineering, environmental engineering, chemical engineering, you name it. And in addition to that, we might actually have places like nursing, College of Nursing, maybe the law school, etc. So various colleges within the university. And at the university level, you could be on committees such as looking for grants, like travel grants for researchers. So that's an extra one there. Other different committees as well. So that's kind of service within your university. But there's also service outside the university to the general academic community at large. So that could be where, for instance, you are serving like I am as an editor of journal, where you're basically, some other people are submitting papers or works to your journal, and your job is to see if this paper could be published by your journal, to see if it's of high enough of a standard. So either you look at it yourself if you feel you have the expertise, or you find someone that actually you think has the expertise to review it. Now at a more junior level, I've done this also, I still do this as a reviewer. Basically, it is your task, you're the expert, so you would read the paper in depth, go through it, make sure that the actual conclusions follow from the assumptions plus the data plus the model, etc., the arguments, that it's somewhat novel, whatever the actual the things that you're supposed to look for are. You have to write up a report based on that to give some feedback to the editors, and ultimately then the editors are going to make their decision about whether the paper requires further revisions before it passes academic muster. So service could be like that. It could also be at a conference where you're organizing conferences or organizing seminars and speakers and things like this. It could even be other areas as well. So really, service is a big part. It's one of the final parts of the triangle, right? Can you research? Can you teach? Finally, are you a good colleague? Because the last thing people want is someone who's not going to contribute to the actual department or the college or the university. Because you may need to stand in and help with certain visit days or certain other events and kind of partake and improve the actual overall running of the department or running of the college or running of the university. Other thing that you can think about as an academic is the travel. If you love to travel, this could be for you, because some people have a lot of conferences that are abroad. Sometimes they're local, but sometimes they're more national. You've got to travel around the country or even foreign. So for instance, I've gone to conferences on the other side, the west coast of the US, places like San Diego. I've also been, of course, up in Chicago. I have been up around the East Coast and various parts of the East Coast of the US to conferences, but I've also been abroad. I've traveled around Europe for conferences, and I've been invited to places like Hong Kong, but that was during COVID, and other places too. A lot of professors that go to places like in Africa or Asia or South America. So travel is something that you may not think about, but you can sometimes get grants and you can sometimes get all kinds of things if you're either your department, your college, your university, or if you're good enough a researcher. You hopefully should be able to convince people that yes, this is a good thing. You get some travel grants and things like that. It gets quite competitive, but there are various ways of getting travel grants. So travel is a huge part. There's also time. Now, it's a little different to other jobs where there's a very strict, let's say 9 to 5 or 8 to 7 or how the case may be, but you're still going to put the hours in. It's just that you get the job done rather than you do it at a certain time. Now, certainly there are things like coming to lectures and, going to certain times where there's research presentations, but for the most part you have like deadlines that are a few months, a few weeks, and a lot of them are self-imposed. So you need self-discipline, and you're going to notice this when you go from undergrad, where it's a bit freer than high school. You've got less hours in undergrad than you would have in high school in terms of having to be somewhere, but you do have to do exams, right? Then at the graduate level, it's even less. And once you get through your first year prelims and second year field courses in a PhD, at that point it's maybe just once a week for an hour for attending a seminar and maybe just meeting up with your advisor every once in a blue moon. But the rest of the time you're supposed to be working your own. So really much time management, task management, things like that, being able to be in control. So that's very, very important. But you will have a lot more free time in general, let's say, than some other people that might be working in industry. So on a per hour basis, it can be very, very good. Now, you have to know that that takes years and years and years. So you have a long part of training. Now, to a large part, your income is a function of how successful you are, typically in terms of research. So your payment, for instance, summer pay, you get bonuses in certain places, like 1/3 or 2/9 of your annual salary you get paid in the summer, based on you keeping up an active research profile. So publishing, etc., and keeping up with certain things. So that's definitely one. But also in terms of making lateral moves. Now in the US, it's fairly a flat schedule. So your payment doesn't really go up that much over time, unless you go into more administrative positions. For instance, if you take on the head or the chair of a department, or you're super excelling at research to the point where you might be lucky enough to get and skilled enough to get something like an endowed chair. But typically there's not a fantastic increase relative, let's say, to European universities in terms of the salary increase. But you are at a good salary in the US. But definitely research is the primary determinant of whether you get more money or less. Now there are things like speaking engagements and other things we'll talk about where you can get more, but research is your number one for getting a boost in terms of the income. Oh, there you are. I thought I lost you for a minute. So, one of the things about it being an academic is the lifestyle, right? And I absolutely love it because you're learning something new every day. No 2 days are the same. Sure, there's a little bit of repetition. Every year you might be teaching a new course, or rather the same course. But even the same course, you typically have to update it. There's typically new data, new lessons, etc. And in research, of course, you're always finding out something new. You're going to conferences, you're even hearing department seminars, and you're learning all the time and helping out and learning something new. So it's always very fun. So the lifestyle is great. You're always, keeping yourself young as well, because you're interacting essentially with a lot of people that are much more youthful. So when I started not so long ago, I am a millennial, and most of the students when I started here, they were all millennials until 5 minutes ago. And now all the students I've had pretty much after COVID era are all what you call Gen Z. Now the terminology is different, the lexicon, the argot. I'm having to learn a lot. So when they come in here and they visit me here during office hours, and sometimes I'm kind of talking with them, asking them multiple questions, and they're asking me questions. So you definitely have to keep up, because even just the zeitgeist, the cultural references. So they might talk to me about who they're listening to, the music, etc., the movies, and I might assume that they've watched all the same movies, like Beautiful Mind about John Nash with Russell Crowe. They don't all know that these days, right? And I would have made references to Justin Timberlake or Britney Spears, or even, Taylor Swift is still back there, but there are other people. So even Justin Bieber is counted as an old man at this point, right? So they've gone down, and Post Malone has gone down. So it's like, oh, well, who do you now listen to? And it's like Ariana Grande has gone old, and all these other ones are gone old. So who are the modern people they listen to? So that's changed, but it keeps you young. You're the whole time figuring out what are people that are around the 18 to 22 age into, right? So not that you just listen to music, but other things as well. So it's a wonderful environment for just keeping yourself young. That's definitely something that's a hidden part of, maybe you don't think about when you're becoming an academic, but it definitely is something fun. My father used to say that when he was about 65 before he retired, that being an academic keeps you young, and now I understand why. Now that my generation, so before, he was in the boomers generation, and of course that was getting on, and then there was the Gen X, kind of, who were, I guess boomers were there when I started, and then the Gen X are there still. But then when I came in first, I thought I'm the young one, like I'm the young blood, I'm a millennial, and that was cool up till COVID. Then post-COVID, it's all really Gen Z. But in a few years, it's going to be Gen Alpha, so they'll take over at that point. But in addition to the lifestyle, which is fantastic, you also get that society, right? And the general society. Now, years and years ago, before modern media and such, there was definitely this respect, a huge respect for academics all around. Now, that may have changed with media, etc., showing like the truth, etc., behind people, but I still think there's that definite thing about society. At the societal level, the media level, like one of the things that drew me there was the kudos, or the status. That was definitely something when I was thinking of going into becoming an intern, or I was an intern rather, in the stockbroking field. It was something that kind of changed me a little bit. I thought, yeah, stocks and everything, that's fun, right? That's enjoyable. There are some amazing people in the stock market. They're street smart, sometimes book smart too. But my experience in academia was, well, everyone is at least book smart, and yeah, there are very smart people in other areas as well, but the one thing I did notice was there was maybe one or two people, not putting them down, but they really kind of turned me off that kind of role. I realized afterwards, they're not all super into reading, super into the academics, super into how the way the economy works. As long as they're making money, they're fine. They don't really need to understand how it really works, and that kind of bothered me a little bit. So there is that. I loved in academia just this highbrow intelligentsia aspect and the status. Definitely in my father's time, this was a big part of the job, was the status of being an academic. It really was looked up to. I think that was a big part of even the social and how you were valued, etc. in society level. There was a doctor so-and-so or professor so-and-so, some learned expert. Now, maybe there's been some decline in that respect over the years, but certainly that was a big part of the initial pull, the initial draw towards it. So, of course, you have society, you have the media as well. You can partake in the media. And I have in the past. I've done some work, let's say, when around Brexit was coming out. Now, I kind of know I've come back into the media to a certain extent, at least the social media. But I really didn't think that my forte was media, especially when I was on that really rickety road or rocky road of the publish or perish part. So that was under tenure. And at that point, I had to focus primarily on academic research as well as teaching and keeping up a certain amount of service, but the research and teaching were the major ones for getting tenure. Of course, you do want to show your service, you do want to show that you care about the university, you're going to be a team player, but the major part was research and also was a certain amount of teaching. So media wasn't the number one thing for me when I was going through the tenure clock. But now I've kind of changed that a little bit, but media could be for you, who knows, right? Like if you feel like you like talking about the latest current events and you feel like you can, add a certain amount of information to the media, be a specialist, someone they're going to quote on newspapers. So they were quoting me around the time of Brexit, just in terms of Ireland and the UK, what was going to happen, the different possibilities for the economy. So that was fun, but again, it's not for everyone, but again, it could be that for you, that's something. So just keep in mind that media is one avenue. So there are some professionals or economists in other areas as well that the media is how they thrive as academic experts, and they can lend their opinions, whether it's online or in interviews, etc. So that can be a quite big thing for some of you. So one other thing to keep in mind is your training. So that could be the training that you've been doing when you're a PhD student, and for some people they receive excellent training as PhD students, and in that regard, good for you. You're basically ahead of the posse. Some people, they get more training in terms of continuing education. So that is that when they go to conferences, so I know myself when I go to the American Economic Association, at the end of the conference there's usually some excellent training opportunities. And so I like to go to those training sessions, and it's just that wonderful aspect that you're always learning as an academic. That can be really special, just that constant learning, right, that growth. But, as I said, the biggest thing in academia is promotion and tenure. Tenure is the big one, right? That elusive tenure and that clock. Usually it's a 3 and 3 in some universities, so 3 years until the first evaluation, and then another 3 years later on. And so, you really have only a certain amount of time, and they're really looking at your research publication or your track record. So that's highly important. And again, it's publish or perish, especially in the US. So that's very important. Research, getting promotion, getting tenure, getting permanency, and then eventually publishing. I mean, publishing is just getting your paper to be accepted by the general academic community. And if you can do that, wonderful, good for you. It's very, very hard, but once you get through it, the first one, it's like escape velocity. The next ones are easier once you've done the first. It's a little bit like dating, right? Getting that experience, the competence breeds confidence, and just getting through that first publication or first few. People trust you a bit more once you've actually published. Once you've actually shown you've published a few, then it's a little easier to publish more of them, right? They trust that you're actually able to do things like that. So that's important, right? To do the publishing. And, beyond that, you can think about maybe, when we're comparing, say, private versus public. So, the public, you could think about, like, maybe if you're working in a university setting, again, not necessarily private colleges or public colleges, but more just working in university versus working in the private sector. If you're maybe in the arts, then maybe your best thing is to be in the university. It may not be a same good outside option, but if maybe you're in business, maybe the outside option is pretty lucrative. So you do have that opportunity cost. There's also the comparison, so because again, some people have skills that for me, like as an economist, I could be potentially working in hedge funds, private equity, investment banks, etc., looking at macro forecasting. Not that it's right now what I'm doing, but the opportunity cost is quite a lot because there's a lot of income there. But I did not choose academia for income, and that's not what you should be looking at in terms of you get a good job, you get a great income. And in terms of the hourly rate, it's fantastic, right? Because you're going to be working a lot if you're working in the real world in comparison. So there is that. Now, you could think about the US versus the rest of the world. So why am I here? I mean, the US is pretty much like the modern day Roman Empire, right? It's like Division 1, first league. Could be like the Premier League in soccer or La Liga in Spain for a while, right? Where the best teams play. So, I mean, I love Shamrock Rovers in Ireland, but it's not the same as, say, Liverpool or Arsenal, Manchester United or Barcelona or Real Madrid. So the US has just renowned for the amount of like great graduate programs, great researchers. It's just the productive environment. There's also just the scaling effect or the network effects. So whether you're on the East Coast, which is probably the strongest because you have your MITs, your Harvards, your Yales, your Princetons, even your University of Pennsylvania, your Dartmouths, your Brown, right? A lot of these top colleges. You've also got the Federal Reserve in my area as well, so other places like the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, the World Bank. Whereas in the West Coast, yeah, sure, you got your Stanford, you got your Berkeley, and also, of course, the places like Chicago. And again, I'm just showing, the video would go on for too long if I started to show all the really good colleges, but you know, you could think about that versus Europe, which is still good, but outside of maybe your Oxford, your Cambridge, your London School of Economics, maybe Warwick, maybe UCL in England, there are other ones, but again, the video would become very long. In, you know, you've got places like Barcelona, Toulouse, Paris, you know, you can think about Bocconi, Madrid, but there's just not the same networking effects. There's not the same scale. There's not the same productive environment that there would be in the US. The amount of money, etc., is just higher. Salaries are higher. Again, not to say that you're here for the salaries, but really that's a big difference. So the US is and always has been really kind of dominating on that regard. So whether you're thinking public, or you're thinking going to the private sector, or you're thinking the US. Again, there's also this flat issue, like in Europe, there's a big promotion that goes up, whereas in America it's pretty flat. Unless you get poached to a much better institution, and that's usually like a lateral move, or you go vertical, right? You go into the administration, but then you're doing almost no teaching or no research. You're there for service, purely service. You're going, ultimately, like you start at the chair or the head, then you become, let's say in the dean's office, and then eventually maybe the president or the provost, thing like that. And you do get a difference there. You do get salary upgraded, right? But you're not really doing the same as the typical academic in that regard. You're more selling the university, organized, more like the managerial, the corporate suite, etc., running the financing of the university, advertising, marketing the university, things like that. So there's a huge amount there that's very, very different. So in the US, typically it's flat line. Like you're lucky to have tenure. There's not a huge promotion. And the same with full professor, not a huge promotion relative to the salary, and especially relative to Europe, where you might be on about 40,000 euros bare minimum starting off, but that will go all the way up to about 170,000, like you know, about 4x, or a little bit over 4x the original salary. That's just not the case. But on the other side, you're starting at a great higher rate in the US, so that's why there's a flatter slope in terms of the promotion, right? So it's very, very different in that regard. Now there are certain perks that you may not have considered, you know, such as, and this is very, very small, but things like even like your office supplies as an academic. It also could be that you have educator expenses for your taxes and things like that. I know it's very minor, but every little helps. So that's also a major one. Now in addition to that, right, your supplies, your educator expenses, your tax write-offs, you also have to consider just small little perks that you might get along the way. So there's other bonuses and things like that. Of course, if you're getting travel grants, if you're getting certain meals, there's a lot more, I guess, perks and things that you don't necessarily consider. So is that to it? Could be office expenses, could be including computers that you're using for work, things like that to help you with your research. You know, the assistance from research assistants and the funding for that, the funding for certain software programs, data, to basically help you conduct your research. And again, it should be your passion, it should be your love, it should be what drives you, right? You're here, like I am, like you're here to basically to advance society's knowledge. You're not here for the paycheck. The paycheck is all well and fine, and unfortunately it's what kind of keeps some of the best minds away from academia. They're driven for the paycheck. And it'd be nice to have more minds in academia to kind of push the boundaries of our knowledge, because we're, you know, one of the biggest thing about economic growth is productivity enhancements, and you know, the more minds that are working on a problem, the better. Okay, that's how you think of the Manhattan Project. I know it was a dark end with the nuclear, but you know, it could be other things as well. So the more brain power, right, and a lot of that is incentivized through salaries, and unfortunately we don't have the greatest there in terms of our salaries, right? Sometimes, because it's like you're not really here for that reason, but as a result, right, you just don't always get the best minds. So there are some other perks. I mean, there's also, like, you know, you're getting to network with some of the world's best minds, some of the Nobel laureates. I've had some wonderful experiences, conversations, meetings, talking with, like going for lunch with, chatting after seminars with a lot of Nobel laureates, especially some of my favorites, like a big shout out to Chris Sims in Princeton University. I saw him first at the Lindau Nobel meetings for the young scientists, where we were kind of around the Swiss, Austrian, German borders in the Alps. Absolutely beautiful experience, and along with John Nash was supposed to be there from Beautiful Mind, but there was some last minute delay, some last minute issue from him. But then again, I got to saw him again. Chris is at Princeton and also at the University of Pennsylvania for a peer conference. So there's just a huge amount of that, of mingling with top minds. So I've also mingled with some of the top policymakers, from like Angela Merkel, even Bertie Ahern many years ago when I first started in Ireland. And you really do, you do have the access, you gain access to people, like certain heads. I shouldn't name too many names right now that are current, but you do gain access to that. So there is that. There is the political realm as well. If you're an advisor, you can get into more politics, or even people do consulting. I don't personally do consulting, but you could do more consulting work. There's also the beauty of whatever campus you get to work on. Some campuses are prettier than I'm blessed, I'm fortunate. I absolutely love this campus. It's not utilitarian. A lot of not to be bashing on economics, but I've had enough times I've gone to places where economics is really just utilitarian. Like there are certain universities that are beautiful, but then where the economics is situated is not so beautiful. So, and again, there's lots of other beautiful campuses as well. I'm just very grateful, very blessed with Villanova University here. I've absolutely loved every minute that I've been here over the years. It's just been a wonderful experience, and long may it last. I was fortunate to get through the tenure track process. Had some more health concerns in the last few years, physical health concerns, but I've done some good research in the last while, hopefully more to come. And loved the teaching, loved the pride, go Wildcats. And basketball team, that wasn't written down, so I'm not saying anything, but around, not too close to the round time I was born, we won. But then my first year that I was here, 2015-16, we won the national championships again, and it wasn't written in my contract that when I came to Villanova that we would win the national championships, but we did, so I will take that. And then 2 years later in 2018 we won it for a third time, the basketball being one of my favorite sports as a teenager. I was a basketball addict from about 13 to about 15, 16. I thought it'd be my number one, and my growth spurt just stopped. Thought it'd be like some of my family that are well over 6 foot, in the mid 6 foot kind of range, but no, that wasn't for me, so I stopped. But it's just been a wonderful experience all around here at Villanova. Not just the campus, but the people are so friendly. There's a lot of there's a lot of places where there's a lot of bickering and such, but not so much here. And the students being so friendly, opening doors, a cultural shock to me. They weren't slamming doors in my face. They're paying attention. They're awake for class, not hiding. The girls aren't hiding behind the hair, trying to fall asleep. The guys aren't putting the hoodies over the face. So there is that as well. It's just been a wonderful experience all around here at Villanova University. The library up there that big room there kind of reminds me of some of the rooms in Yale and Princeton, some of the big study rooms. Kind of see it there. It's our Falvey Library. Just a small part of the campus tonight, because I don't want to make this video into a 40-minute video. I'll walk all over the campus. But hopefully this is kind of helpful, what we're doing. So it really is a great place, very safe campus, good student body, very engaged, very polite, very safe, very friendly, very, very affluent environment in the greater Philadelphia suburbs. It was actually started by a Dubliner from my own home country. He was making the promise, and he was there. He met George Washington, so it's not too far from Valley Forge, about 10 miles away, where the turn of the American War of Independence, Revolutionary War, happened. It's not too far again, 10 miles outside the city of Philadelphia, city of brotherly love, where they signed the Declaration of Independence. Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, all a lot, right? So really a historic, I would say Philadelphia is the historic city in the US. Sure, Boston has its time too, New York for certain parts, but I think Philadelphia, given it was the capital after all, before DC, while it was under British rule. So certainly a lovely city, lovely campus, and a great, I guess, alma mater for me as an academic, as a professor, rising up from an assistant to an associate, where I'm currently an associate level. There's one extra notch above mine, which is the full professor, and that's it really. After that, you're talking about endowed chairs and maybe the Nobel Prize, right? But not for me. That's not me. That's true. I leave that to greater minds. I'm happy where I am. So it's our core hall. And I'll see you on the inside. So now that we're back inside, one last thing to talk about probably is academic freedom. So typically what this means is that you're free to more or less research within your field, within your domain of expertise. So, it could be for me, for instance, as an economist, as a macroeconomist. Of course, I was hired as an international computational financial macroeconomist. But then I gradually moved into monetary economics, but that's pretty much, it's within the realm. And I've done some papers on inequality and macroeconomics. I've also done some papers on finance, kind of asset pricing, portfolio theory, which is not too far away. And that's kind of where my current research lies. I've done some economic growth as well. But, really, you can write to a certain amount on whatever topic you like, provided it's not like totally dissimilar to your field, and you may even get away with it, but you might get some eyebrows raised. But generally speaking, for me now, I'm kind of more focusing on asset pricing, portfolio management, things like that. So some of my most recent papers have been in quantitative finance, and I had a recent article there, the lead article in the journal called Quantitative Finance on asset pricing, where I was solving a puzzle called the naive portfolio puzzle. So why spend so many years doing a PhD if just equally investing, if you've got $10, put $1 in 10 different stocks, right? If there's 10 things to invest in, put 1 over 10 or 10% in each stock. That was really hard to beat. So I showed by putting the right gasoline in the car, right, to actually using the correct volatility models, that kind of puzzle actually went away. So a lot of the puzzle was to do with that. So yeah, that's my most recent research now. Of course, I'm doing some stuff in Bloomberg, taking, for instance, new measures of volatility, new measures in looking at international banking flows and how they relate to this uncertainty, this volatility. So yeah, a lot of my new research is looking at data and trying to get measures of volatility and showing how that can basically have a relation with cross-border bank flows, but also looking at this idea of asset pricing. And in fact, my recent research, most recent, I guess, work in progress that I'm currently doing, probably coming out in the next year or two, is really looking at AI and looking at fundamental versus technical analysis in different asset classes such as stocks, crypto, but also certain derivatives as well. So that's all a bit of fun. It's all kind of finance, portfolio finance, asset pricing, and it's related to financial economics, which is one of the subjects that I was sort of on the border of teaching. Definitely I've already taught things like applied computational financial economics, where we looked at option pricing model, Black-Scholes, etc. But this is more looking at fundamental of companies, as well as technical or chartist stuff. So I've done some research on exchange rates in the past that I published internationally. So it's not a million miles away from my international finance when I first came in the PhD into Villanova. But with that said, guys, like, subscribe, and comment on what videos you think you'd like me to do next.